afternoon. Welcome. It is Thursday at 1:01 p.m. Central, starting a minute late today. I'm just going to check my technology and make sure I have the right mic, the right camera, settle in for a minute, and say again, welcome. Thank you for joining. Whether you're live or watching this recorded, I am so delighted that you're here. My name is Annie Archer-Byerley, and this is part of my Thursday Happy Desk Lunch series. Today's topic is coaching. What even is it? And as we take a minute for everybody to kind of arrive, get settled in, get ready to think about this topic, I have a question for you. Think about the greatest coach you've ever had. What made them so great? I'm just going to give you a minute to think about that, have a sip of my coffee. Now, if you're joining us live, you're welcome to use the comment feature to share your ideas, ask any questions that you may have. Sorry, I'm just taking a minute just to kind of check the stream and everything, make sure we're all here. Great. Yeah, feel free to answer any questions, drop any ideas, thoughts that you have into the comments on LinkedIn. And I'll periodically kind of pause and hold for that, kind of check everything, just because I want to make sure we can be as interactive as possible in that environment. So, thinking about the greatest coach you ever had and what made them great, chances are there are some elements that may have come up for you. There might be something like expertise. Say if you're thinking about a sports coach or a coach who is helping you do your job better. There might be something like, kind of a motivational spirit, somebody who helps you achieve things, gives you a lot of support and accountability. This might be somebody who's asking you questions, helping you think through things, using other coaching techniques that we'll talk about in a few minutes to help guide you in this process of self-discovery. And I think when I ask these people this question, a lot of what comes up for people is kind of how a coach can make you feel. It's this partnership and this support aspect that can really speak to people. So as we go through our material today, just keep that coach in mind and maybe think about how some of these things could apply. So taking a moment to check the chat. Oh, Maisha, you're here. I'm so excited that you're here. Maisha is somebody who I know personally, and she's talking about her greatest coach being insightful and asking great questions. Yes, this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So thank you for sharing that. And again, I will keep an eye on the chat. Quick confession, this is one of the first times I've had somebody join live, and I have just discovered where the chat shows up on my screen. So thank you for allowing me to have that learning moment, which is very related to coaching. I probably should have introduced myself by now. Hello, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Annie Archer-Byerley, and I call myself an anti-corporate career and leadership coach and trainer. And I'm really here to bring you all of the things that you would get from a big corporation's learning and development department directly to you without the corporate BS. And I do a live every Thursday. I'm thinking of the series as Happy Desk Lunch, because the idea is that instead of going to some dry lunch and learn with your sad desk salad, you can come in, learn some things, ask some questions, and kind of make that sad desk salad a little bit less sad. I like to make these as interactive as possible, as Maisha just demoed for us. You're free to drop kind of your thoughts, your questions, everything like that in the comments. I will get an alert when you do, and we can use those to form our discussion. I will have some moments throughout where I kind of pause and allow you the space to do that. So Our topic today, which I've been calling What Even Is Coaching, is actually based on some of the kind of most interesting, I guess you'd call them best performing posts that I've put up on LinkedIn lately. It seems like every time I post a video or something that's kind of an introduction to coaching and how it works, people are interested and want to know more. I'm a professional coach. I also used to teach a manager as coach class in corporate. So I'm bringing both of those perspectives today to really help you think through what coaching is in a professional sense and also what it might look like for you at work. So ultimately, the idea is for you to come away with a better understanding of coaching and also to offer you some techniques that you can use kind of in your day-to-day life if you are a coach or if you are having coach-like conversations at work. So with that, instead of getting into some sort of technical definition of coaching, I like to really situate it in this work context that you're probably already familiar with. And I like to think through it as different types of conversations that you're likely to hear in your day to day. There are four of them. You've probably encountered each type before. Often they kind of blend together, but we'll talk about how you can distinguish them. So the first type is consulting. And that is when someone comes in. Generally, they're outside of your kind of situation, outside of your day to day, and they were coming in to provide you with expertise and guidance. This is all about the subject matter. This is helping you polish your resume. This is helping you come up with your business strategy. And what you'll often hear from the perspective of the consultant you're having the conversation with is something like, let me tell you what you should do. Mentoring is also when somebody brings in their own perspective to help you. It's more of a collaborative partnership. You're learning from the other person and their experiences. Often you'll find a mentor kind of in your field, perhaps in your organization or outside of it. They may be somebody you really admire. You might be a mentor to somebody, but it's really about learning from that person's experience. So they may hear a situation that you're in and say, let me tell you what I did in this situation. Feedback is kind of where we shift to your perspective on the other end of the conversation in a way, right? Feedback is all about helping you understand what your actions and behavior are, perhaps encouraging a change or maybe reinforcing things that you do well. So that's the kind of, well, let me tell you what you did here. Let me tell you what you did right. Let me tell you what you did wrong. There are lots of different ways of thinking about feedback, kind of delivering it, presenting it. That's a whole nother live for, I don't know, maybe a few weeks from now if y'all are interested. But it's all about somebody helping you understand what your behavior is from their perspective and the impact that it had generally on the person who's giving you the feedback. And then finally, we have coaching. And that's what we're really here to talk about today. Coaching is a collaborative partnership. When we look at a kind of ICF, and when I say ICF, I'm referring to the International Coaching Federation, which is our major professional organization as coaches. The kind of ICF definition is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. That sounds really kind of big and kind of lofty, but really at its heart, coaching is a conversation. It's about having a partnership. It's about one person asking the other person's questions to help them figure it out for themselves. So coaching, you're going to hear, let me help you figure it out for yourself. Or even, what do you think? What do you think in this situation? What would you like to do? This is where I tell my clients, you have all the equipment, you just need to read the manual. And as a coach, I'm here to help you read the manual. It's a Legally Blonde quote, by the way. So we'll get more into coaching now, what it looks like, skills, techniques, questions, all of that. But before we do, I just want to take a minute and pause and just give you a minute to think about these types of conversation. If there's anything you've found yourself having a lot of at work, if you find that a couple of these types of conversations maybe bleed into each other and combine, if you've got a favorite conversation to have, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts about conversation types. Yeah, so I see, Maisha, you're talking about the breakdown and making the distinction super clear with the let me tell you. I should say I actually, I think this may not be in my notes. I borrowed that from a colleague. So so credit to him. But yeah, it's one of those things where once you know what these types of conversations are and you know what to listen for when you're having the conversations, that helps you kind of figure out what they are, where to go, and what you'd like to get out of them. And funnily enough, that's given me an idea for another live at some point. It would be fun to unpack all of these different things with y'all. So making a note of that, hold me to it. You might see it on the calendar in a couple weeks. And if we have no other thoughts, let's dive more into coaching, what coaching looks like and what it's for. So when I think about coaching, when I think about it from a corporate kind of manager as coach context, there's a lot about, helping somebody, usually an employee of yours or a direct report, discover their potential, figure out ways to do things for themselves. When I teach manager at coach, we talk a lot about self-solving, employee development. If you coach somebody, they'll go out and find their own answers instead of coming to you all the time with questions, all sorts of things like that. When I think about kind of professional coaching, the kind of ICF kind of leadership, performance, life coach, whatever coach perspective, I really see it on a continuum between being someone's therapist and being their recruiter or consultant. When you're thinking about therapy, a lot of that is looking at the past. There may be resolving trauma, resolving issues, talking a lot about feelings. When you're looking at more of that kind of consulting, recruiting side, if you're working with executive search, right? That's all about, here's your job search, here's what you do with your resume, in sports, right? Here's how you develop this technique. Here's how you do something. With coaching, it really sits in the middle. So sometimes in a coaching session, feelings will come up and we'll deal with them, we'll acknowledge them, we'll kind of move forward with that. We also think a lot about goals, action items, what you'd like to do. But the difference is, coaching is like vitamins, not medicine. It's therapy, it's not therapeutic. So we're dealing with the feelings and how they affect you now and moving through it. And in coaching, in terms of kind of goals and actions, coaches are not here to tell you what to do or who to be, give you advice or guidance or anything like that. It's all about helping you figure that out for yourself. So we're kind of sitting right in the middle there. And as far as what a coaching session looks like, it's really just a conversation, right? We framed this whole thing in terms of types of conversations, things you might hear. In coaching, you're going to hear a lot of questions. It's a little bit different than kind of the conversation you'd have with friends at brunch, right? It's not kind of the, "Hey, how are you doing? How are your kids? What do you think of those really delicious chicken tenders that we're eating?" Right? That kind of thing, catching up, talking. It's really about going deeper and creating this kind of vulnerability and empowerment, kind of holding space. I feel like I'm throwing out a lot of very kind of technical coaching words, but I think the thing to know is at its heart, coaching is a conversation, it is a partnership, and is about the coach supporting the client to do whatever they want to achieve. And I'm going to pause for a minute to see if anybody's got questions or thoughts before we move on. We're going to talk about some techniques next. Okay. So, one of the things that makes a coaching conversation different, and one of the things that makes, I think, a kind of professional coaching session different than what you might see kind of with a manager who's coaching you at work are coaching techniques. So I'll go through kind of 4 of my favorite. There are lots of different coaching techniques out there. I think I learned like 20 during my training. And coaches will bring them in at different points in a conversation to help you figure out where to go, to help you think through things. So, one of my absolute favorites is silence. This works really well in a coaching context, whether it's professional or managerial, and actually in your life. You just ask a question and give the person time to answer. That's it. Slowing down, pausing, giving them the time to think. This is why I have the coffee, to give y'all a minute. And that is the nice thing about silence. It can introduce kind of a calmness, and it can really give you a space to think through and to process something, kind of come up with these kind of deliberate answers to questions. There are also techniques like metaphor. You might also think of analogies, similes. So it can look like being in a coaching session, feeling some sort of really kind of heavy emotional weight and thinking about it as a backpack that you're carrying with you. What are some other metaphors I've seen recently? I've had metaphors about people's pets come up, dogs, like somebody's trying to solve a problem and they're attacking it, like their dog might attack a toy. There are ways of, like somebody thinking of themselves as the CEO of their family, and if they put the CEO hat on, how they make a decision. So metaphors are a way of kind of giving you a different perspective and a different way of thinking about things that may be, yeah, it feels kind of silly, right? Sometimes you're not really wearing a backpack, you're not really a dog, but it's a way of taking you out of the normal and reframing and thinking through things in a different light. Embodiment is another technique that you'll see in a coaching session, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's thinking about where you feel something in your body. You say kind of hopping mad, jumping for joy. You have a gut feeling, there's something in the pit of your stomach, you have butterflies. A lot of those are actually combining metaphor and embodiment, but you kind of get the picture. And in a coaching session, sometimes what I'll do is if there's a client who maybe has kind of a feeling of unease or nervousness or even happiness, it's kind of, where do you feel that? Okay, can you focus on it? you can't find the word or something, can you give me, kind of a sign or a hand gesture? No, it was like, hooray, or is it like, ugh? So embodiment and working physically is something that we do. And then values and purpose are another technique that I really love working with clients. And that's, to me, kind of a defining technique of coaching. And it's about thinking through what are the things that are important to you as a client, kind of at your core, what you want to achieve in the world, who you are, and taking those aspects of yourself, which we can actually really clearly define through coaching, and applying them to different situations. You have a difficult situation come up at work, you're having trouble making a decision. Which value are you honoring at the moment? Which path is most aligned with your purpose? So I just want to pause, take a minute, practice silence, and just check the chat to see if anybody's got thoughts, questions, comments about different coaching techniques. I feel like I speed explained them. So if anybody wants me to go back and talk more about any of the types, I'm happy to do that. So the technique that didn't make it onto this list, because it's something that I want to spend the rest of our time together on, is questions. And when we think about questions in coaching, we tend to call them powerful questions. We talked a little bit about, the questions you would hear at brunch earlier, the, hey, how's your family? What do you think of the chicken tenders? Powerful questions are different. They tend to be very open-ended. They tend to really make you think and maybe be a little bit vulnerable. So I've got another question for you, which may or may not be powerful, but here's my question. What is the most thought-provoking question you have ever been asked? Oh, let's see. Maisha, sorry, I think I'm on a little bit of a delay, and I've just seen your thought come in about embodiment. Um, if you don't mind, let's come back to it at the end. Um, so we can give you kind of a couple more minutes to think about questions, and then I'll come back to embodiment at the end of our chat. So, questions that are thought provoking. And I just want to acknowledge that if we are on a delay, I'll check the chat again in a minute to see if anybody's dropped questions in it. I think with powerful questions, Maisha, you've just demoed it, right? I think I actually can show comments on here. Hold on. There we go. Maisha says, ooh, let me think about the most thought-provoking. That is exactly kind of what a powerful question is, right? Yay, I added, or I got one. Those are the questions that make you think. Those are the questions that make you pause and wonder. They tend to be very open-ended. They tend to take a while to answer. And they're the kind of thing where it's kind of hard to define and describe what they are. You know when you see one. You know it when it happens. So there are lots of different types of powerful of coaching questions. But what I wanted to give you today is a couple of examples just to make this really concrete and make this something that you can kind of take away and use in your day-to-day life. So thinking about open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions. Open-ended are, What are your thoughts? There's no one answer. Closed-ended questions are a yes or no question. You've only got a couple of alternatives. And I like to think of this as a continuum. And since this is Happy Desk Lunch, we'll talk about where you want to go for lunch. So the most open version of that question is, where would you like to go for lunch? Right? Could be any answer. Could be the place down the street, could be somebody really wants to, go to Paris and eat croissants for lunch, but, that's not feasible. There's so many possibilities just with where do you want to go to lunch. Making it a little bit more closed, which Mexican restaurant do you want to go to for lunch? I have removed a bunch of options when I focus on just Mexican food. Although if you're in South Texas like me, there's still plenty of Mexican food options around. So I might say, hey, would you rather go to Pete's Taco House or Gloria's for lunch? I've given you 2 options to pick one. Right, so we're narrowing our focus more. And if I say, hey, don't you want to go to Pete's Taco House for lunch? The answer is probably yes, not only because Pete's is a delicious local institution, but also because of the way I framed it. That's a question that's giving you the answer at the same time. So when we're really talking about, hey, don't you want to do this? That's turned it into only one option. And if the answer is really yes, you want to go to Pete's, great. If you have a corn allergy and you feel obligated to say yes, ugh, bad experience. So as you're thinking of questions, both as a coach, as somebody who's kind of out in the world doing work, perhaps managing people, working with colleagues, just think about how open your questions are and how prescriptive you might be with those. So I'm mindful of our time. I do want to get back to Maisha's thoughts about embodiment. So I'm going to take just a quick moment. This is where I normally give you some sort of like homework assignment thing to take away and think about. But we are in the 2 weeks every quarter where I start shouting about my services and try to remember to include calls to action in all of my content. So I'm going to take a brief second and tell you a little bit about my coaching practice. I work with individuals one-on-one to help you explore issues about kind of career transition, how you can feel more grounded, more alive at work. And I have several different types of options and coaching engagements. Often I'll work with people for kind of 6 to 12 months to really focus on transitions and how to make them. I've also just introduced a new package that I call 9 to Thrive. So that's 9 weeks of coaching and support. It's 3 coaching sessions and a full 9 weeks of kind of asynchronous text and email, um, accountability check-ins, powerful questions that you can kind of take and answer on your own. And it's designed to help you identify your values and purpose and bring them more into your life so you can feel more grounded and alive at work. That's something that I limit the number of places, and signups will be open from this Saturday, which is September 13th, through September 22nd. Once those 8 places are gone, they're gone. If it's something you are interested in doing, send me a message, let me know. And I would love to talk to you more about coaching. At which point we have reached our thank you page. If you have to drop, that's totally fine. We're at 1:30 Central. You can scan the QR code at the top left corner of your screen, or go to anniearcher-byerley.com/happydeskdessert for your kind of afters. You can find out more about my practice, ways to work with me, And also there are a couple of tasty treats on there for you if you'd like to continue the discussion and continue learning more about coaching. So with that, Maisha, hopefully you have a few extra minutes, or if anybody else would like to stay on, let's talk about embodiment for a sec. If you have any specific questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I'll go back to we don't need to go back to the slide, but I think of embodiment as a couple of things. I trained as a yoga teacher about 10 years ago, and I think that's where my embodiment kind of starts. So if you imagine being in a yoga class and kind of directing your attention to different poses, to kind of where you are, where are your shoulders? Are you standing straight? Like that kind of thing. You can also kind of approach thinking about it in terms of power posing, which I know was another big things a few years ago. So that's like, kind of feeling broader, more powerful, that kind of thing. And I do see Maisha put in the chat, no more questions, just self-study. So thank you for clarifying that. But since I'm already talking about embodiment and getting a little bit too excited about it, perhaps, you can think of it as kind of directing attention. You can think of it as, kind of using body positions to kind of change how you feel, right? Stretching feels great. Standing like Superwoman, like, can make you feel more powerful. There's disputed research on that. It's a thing. So I think in terms of coaching and kind of using it with clients, if you're looking to get somebody kind of out of their head, if somebody's doing a lot of kind of thinking, ruminating, churning, that's a way to just kind of draw attention somewhere else to shift perspective. So thank you for coming to my mini TED Talk on embodiment. Thank you again for joining me to talk about coaching today. Thank you also to those of you who joined live. Big shout out to Maisha. I always appreciate your comments, your questions, and how much you participate. And I'm going to give another shout out to Maisha for anybody who's here. Maisha is hands down one of the best coaches I know and have worked with. So you should look her up. She's fabulous. All right. Thank you again for coming. Next week's live is all about thriving at work. That's, yes, kind of fitting in with 9 to Thrive, but also thriving at work is one of those things that I realized I have seen kind of floating around, and it may or may not be kind of the latest corporate buzzword that's hollow. I started thinking about it as kind of a combination of alignment and community. So we'll dive into that next week. And then the week after that will be what I'm calling my anti-corporate QBR, quarterly business review. And that'll be talking about all of the lessons that I have learned since I started my coaching practice, depending on when you count from, in November last year or April or July, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll go through all of the solopreneur, small business, kind of what I've learned, what I'm seeing, successes, failures, and a chance for anybody who wants to ask questions, because I love sharing experiences and hopefully helping our community with that. So with that, I am off for my personal dessert and to finish my coffee, and hopefully I will see you again soon. Bye.